And together, we're just getting started. This moment reminds us that the presidency is about true leadership, having the forethought to prepare for the worst, the backbone to lead through chaos, the character to move beyond politics and serve every American, no matter where they live or what they believe.
Joe Biden is a very nasty, stupid, and egomaniacal man.
No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. 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 Absolute.
Put y'all back in chains. Back in chains. Back in chains.
My state was a slave state. Slave state. Slave state.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
No.
This video is brought to you by Extreme Tees. Click on the link below. Make sure you put Kevin in the promo code and you'll get a 20% discount.
There are many whites who are trying to solve the problem.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
But you never see them going under the label of liberal.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Sr., we fought for voter rights. Now, we never denied that you would not need identification when you register to vote.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Source that would prove that you are citizens of the United States. We fought to be recognized and acknowledged as citizens of the United States.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
But it takes away what we actually fought for, to be recognized as equally recognized as citizens of these United States, regardless of skin color.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Right.
We were fighting to be one blood, one human race. That's not what's going on today, David.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
Well, but you have the President of the United States calling people who support this law that does require identification, but identification that you get for free from the government, or you can use your gas and electric bill or anything. He's calling that Jim Crow. He's calling people who support it racist.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
And yet he's a guy who came in saying he was going to be the great unifier. Does race baiting equal anything close to unifying the nation?
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
President Biden is very adept at race baiting.
We are witnessing right now a massive and unabashed assault on voting rights.
And I would just ask our witness and Lieutenant Governor from North Carolina.
Unlike anything we've ever seen since the Jim Crow era.
Was the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the United States Constitution passed and moved by Republicans or Democrats?
Jim Crow 2.0.
That would be Republicans.
Jim Crow 2.0.
Was the move for the 64 Civil Rights Act and 65 Voting Rights Act led heavily by Republicans or...
President Biden, of course, called efforts to restrict voting in your state of Georgia and elsewhere an atrocity. He said it was Jim Crow in the 21st century.
That would be Republicans.
Let's keep calling it what it is. It's Jim Crow 2.0.
And so as we sit here today, and as we're being accused by many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle of wanting to somehow perpetuate the Jim Crow South, when in fact what we're trying to do is perpetuate laws that you can believe in, that you've so eloquently discussed, do you see any merit in that whatsoever?
Georgia passed sweeping new voting legislation, including many restrictions that some Democrats, such as Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock and Stacey Abrams, have compared to Jim Crow laws.
Absolutely not. And just if I have a moment just to add something, when you talk about that history is clear. Who stood on which side at every turn in history?
Jim Crow 2.0.
It is clear. It's not even in dispute. And it's not in dispute now. What we want is integrity. We don't want power. We want integrity.
Protest was billed as Stop Jim Crow 2.0.
We want the right thing to be done. We want to encourage citizens to be responsible. We want to have the best election system in the world.
Jim Crow 2.0.
It's time that we modernize our election system in this country and stop playing all these silly games based on race. And please, stop using me as a black man as your pawn. And yes, I said it, to push your agenda.
Jim Crow in new clothes.
I'm sick of it.
In the murder of George Floyd last May.
President Biden yesterday responding to the George Floyd case verdict.
It was a murder in the full light of day.
Said that George Floyd's death, quote, ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see the systemic racism in the United States.
And it ripped the blinders off for the whole world to see the systemic racism the Vice President just referred to.
But he's an architect of multiple federal laws in the 1980s and 90s that disproportionately jailed black people.
There was systemic racism that's a stain on our nation's soul.
And contributed to what many people see as systemic racism.
The knee on the neck of justice for black Americans.
To what extent does President Biden acknowledge his own role in systemic racism, and how does that inform his current policy positions?
Well, I would say that one of the president's core objectives is addressing racial injustice in this country, not just through his rhetoric, but through his actions. And what anyone should look to is his advocacy for passing the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, for nominating leaders to the Department of Justice to address long, outdated policies, and to ask his leadership team here in the White House to prioritize these issues in his presidency, which is current and today and not from 30 years ago.
Does he believe it's important to accept his own culpability?
I think I've answered your question.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice, for being there to call out to your mom. How heartbreaking was that? Call out for your mom. I can't breathe. But because of you, and because of thousands, millions of people around the world who came out for justice, your name will always be synonymous. Thank you, George Floyd.
The DNC should be charged for every dollar that is spent in this operation at CNN, because that's all it is. It is a propaganda machine for the Democrat Party.
How many more die of the pandemic, dying from police shootings? George Floyd, Daunte Wright.
You know, this is amazing. First of all, he bundles everything together. Like Daunte Wright and George Floyd are the same person. Like the cops are the same people. This kind of propaganda playing right in. And this is what liberals do, particularly white liberals or white leftists. They play into the narrative, or they promote the narrative.
That white person that you see calling himself a liberal is the most dangerous thing in the entire Western Hemisphere.
I wonder if you'll remember their names 6 months from today, because they'll be replaced by so many others. You're here, people. What are you going to do when you see these shootings? You know what you're going to do. That George Floyd, did you hear about him? That Daunte Wright, did you hear about him? That 13-year-old Adam, you know he was a gangbanger.
Now, wait a minute. I don't even know what to say anymore.
I do that because you want to make the problem them. Takes the onus off the idea that you're wrong about policing not needing to change.
He's the most deceitful. He's like a fox. And a fox is always more dangerous in the forest than the wolf. You can see the wolf coming. You know what he's up to.
Forget that police are trained to deal with non-compliance with force that is not lethal. Hey, comply or die. You know what I mean? And you know what the answer is? You really do. You don't like it. I don't like it. It scares me. Shootings, gun laws, access to weapons. Oh, I know when they'll change. Your kids start getting killed. White people's kids start getting killed. Smoking that doobie that's actually legal, probably.
That's enough.
But the fox will fool you. He comes at you with his mouth shaped in such a way that even though you see his teeth, you think he's smiling and you take him for a friend.
Thank you, George Floyd.
We know that police violence disproportionately impacts Black and Latino people in communities, and that Black women and girls, like Black men and boys, experience higher rates of police violence.
Many whites who act friendly toward Negroes.
Thank you, George Floyd.
There is racism physically built into some of our highways.
The fox acts friendly toward the lamb.
The trampling of racial justice is a cause of climate change.
And we got to make sure we're doing that equitably, especially knowing that it was often in Black and brown communities that there was either a failure to invest and you didn't have a good road or transit system in a certain neighborhood, or the investment came through in the wrong way, like a highway dividing a Black neighborhood in two. There's been a lot of that.
And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate.
Thank you, George Floyd.
White supremacists, Nazi sympathizers, carrying Nazi flags, using the...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't Black.
11-year-old Devon McNeil walked the familiar red brick of the Washington, D.C. Anacostia projects on the night of July 4th, 2020. As he reached for the door handle, Devon was struck in the head with a bullet fired from a car in a random drive-by shooting in his impoverished neighborhood. 2020 was the deadliest year in modern American history. In a recent report, the Council on Criminal Justice looked directly at police crime records. What they found was shocking to the core. Homicides, aggravated assaults, gun assaults skyrocketed in America's Democrat-run cities in 2020. Homicide rates increased by 42% during the summer and 34% in the fall. Look at this data. These are Democrat-controlled cities. The three largest cities in the sample, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, accounted for 40% of the additional homicide victims in 2020. At the end of 2020, Chicago police reported a 50% jump in murders. Los Angeles, 30%. New York City, 40%. Black people are disproportionately represented in these cities. Official FBI crime statistics state that over half the homicide victims in America are indeed Black. This massive increase in homicides will disproportionately affect Black Americans, just like Devon McNeil. Why are we not talking about this atrocity? How did we get here? The easy answer is the policies of the Democratic Party. All lives matter, especially the unborn. If you believe Black Lives Matter, you would have an honest conversation about the practice of abortion and what it has done to the Black community. According to research that can be found directly in the congressional record we are reading right now from congress.gov, Black Americans make up 14% of childbearing population, yet obtained 38% of the reported abortions. Black women have the highest abortion ratio in the country. 19 million Black babies have been aborted since 1973. Those are the facts. That is the population of Florida. It should sicken all of us. Planned Parenthood, the #1 abortion provider in America, receives the majority of its financial support and cult-like defense from national Democrats. Planned Parenthood just admitted this week that their founder, Margaret Sanger, was a racist eugenicist and will be removing her name from buildings.
Who usually poses as the friend of the Negro.
The reality has set in of there's a lot more work to do. I want to bring in Nia, my producer, who has been with me this entire time. And I think we have to start having really difficult conversations with one another. And you and I have, and I appreciate that. But I think that's where this community is at. I was with my family last night, and we were talking about how there's just so much more work to do, especially here in Minnesota. This county in particular is 80% white. So it's seeking out other people and talking to them and making sure that you're having the conversations of what do we do next. And I think that's the reality that's set in over the last couple of days.
On the other hand, I think one could point to a large number of whites who have struggled for civil rights.
I am saddened and shocked at how insensitive I was in that interview with Rachel Lindsay. And I didn't speak from my heart, and that is to say I stand against all forms of racism, and I am deeply sorry. I'm sorry to Rachel Lindsay, and I'm sorry to the Black community.
As a white man who has had privileges that others could not depend on or take for granted, I've clearly had advantages over the course of my life.
The silence is the biggest crime that white guys like me and the rest of us are doing. Staying silent. We need to say something. We need to keep saying something. And we need to stop saying that's not okay more than just one day on Twitter. I realized I needed to get educated about how to stop the silence.
Who usually poses as the friend of the Negro.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility. Black people are being slaughtered in the streets, killed in their own homes. These are our brothers and sisters,
Our friends, our family. We are done watching them die. We are no longer bystanders. We will not be idle. Enough is enough.
I will no longer allow an unchecked moment. I will no longer allow racist, hurtful words, jokes, stereotypes, no matter how big or small, to be uttered in my presence.
Who usually poses as the friend of the Negro.
As a white man who's walked through with life pretty damn easy.
As a white man who walks through life with that privilege, walk in these shoes, walk in these communities.
Yeah, of course all lives matter. But as a white guy, I've never felt that my life didn't matter. I've never been pulled over for driving while white.
I can't control my situation as a white man, but I do owe a little bit, I owe a little bit back for people who didn't have the same opportunities that I had.
She was a child. We're thinking of her friends and family and the communities that are hurting and grieving her loss.
Give me an example.
Well, the large number of white students who have gone into the South, for example, working for SNCC.
So this virtue signaling has been going on for about a year now, and they're doing it really to enhance their own position. And you can hear it for yourself. They're exaggerating the issue, distorting it. This is not the country that you and I live in.
And other organizations.
Not working for SNCC or other organizations, but working for the white political machines who benefit by the voting efforts of Negroes.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sit.
Today, you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negroes in a whole host of areas.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals.
No. I believe in nonviolence, but I'm not going to watch that kind of murder. I love my brother Charles McMillan. That's why he was crying. That's what his tears were about. He felt helpless. We not going to do that. Start killing us like that.
You just mentioned on the vaccine. This is now going to become a public health problem. White evangelical resistance is now an obstacle, per the New York Times, to the vaccination effort. As you just mentioned, millions of white evangelical adults in the U.S. do not intend to get vaccinated against COVID-19. What can be done about that?
When you put this on top of the racism where they're calling, the coronavirus the Chinese virus and all of these other things that, their Lord and Savior Donald Trump said. Yeah, I think there really is. And I think part of what's happening now is that you see a lot younger people and people who have been absolutely disgusted with the movement, disgusted with the racism, disgusted with the homophobia and everything else, who are leaving in droves.
And the question we have to ask ourselves, what if it were your daughter? What if it were your child? What if it were a member of your family, your neighbor, in essentially a teenage fight, a schoolyard fight?
What does Officer Juan Williams do to save the lady's life in pink?
Well, I guess I would shoot the gun, not necessarily at somebody, but maybe shoot the gun and maybe, run at the person and try to disarm them. I don't know. I mean,
so wait. You would shoot the gun in the air like a warning shot?
In the American
And the interstate system was built to keep certain groups in and certain groups out. So it was built on a racist system, correct?
Hi, everyone. Sit. Hi. More parents are seeing the value of educators when they had to bring their kids and said, we're not paying them nearly enough.
We're looking for a guilty verdict. We're looking for a guilty verdict.
Let's be clear. Maxine Waters knew her rhetoric would incite violence in Minneapolis. She doesn't care. She just requests police escorts for herself, as we have been reporting.
Verdict that is say guilty. And if we don't, we cannot go away.
I grew up in the segregated South. I was bused to a segregated school. On weekends, the Klan burned crosses on lawns in our neighborhood. I shared these stories and others to acknowledge on the international stage that I have personally experienced one of America's greatest imperfections. I've seen for myself how the original sin of slavery weaved white supremacy into our founding documents and principles.
Were you comparing bigotry in America to mass atrocities carried out against minorities around the world?
I was acknowledging what is a fact in the United States. Racism does exist in this country. And I think it was a powerful message. Imagine any other country doing that. Our country, the uniqueness of our country is that we can self-criticize.
And we all here in Brooklyn Center recognize the pain that you're going through. And we are going to make sure that everything is done in our power to ensure that justice is done.
My name is Patrice Cullors.
As he reached for the door handle, Davon was struck in the head with a bullet fired from a car in a random drive-by shooting in his impoverished neighborhood.
I am the co-founder of Black Lives Matter.
You never heard Davon's name chanted in BLM marches.
Also, the executive director of the Black Lives Matter Global Network.
She's telling you what she is. She's a Marxist. So Marxists steal money from other people and they enrich themselves.
BLM certainly did not show up to help his family.
Right. Until the people that they stole from are poor. And so she has stolen money from other people on the pretext of a lie that is Black Lives Matter.
Their founders were far too busy buying real estate in neighborhoods much nicer than Davon's.
And she's enriched herself and she's brought 4 home.
No memorials or big yellow letters were painted in the street where Davon died.
I mean, you have to kind of appreciate the honesty. She's not hiding by any means, you know, and so, yeah, I tend to agree with you here. She's a communist through and through, and she's been unbelievably unapologetic in her approach.
Politicians did not visit. They would never dare. Here's why. The Democratic Party is in complete and total control where Davon died.
Al Sharpton must be looking at this and saying, like, I've done this for 40 years. Where did I go wrong? I don't have a house in Topanga Canyon.
They have been for generations. His death is a direct result of their failed leadership and corrosion of safety for Black Americans.
No, you're right. The corporations are standing behind her, which is incredibly interesting. And you pointed to something really important. You know, these corporations that are pouring millions and millions of dollars into Black Lives Matter, and you're correct, they said we raised more than $90 million. How much more, we will never know.
For all Americans. That is why Democrats do not want you to remember Davon.
But $90 million, of which $21 million apparently went to, according to Black Lives Matter themselves, it went to building the Black movement.
If you did, you may ask the question, do Democrat politicians actually care about Black lives?
Like, I don't even know what that means. $25 million going to building a Black movement. Apparently, the Black movement was Patrice moving herself, a Black woman moving herself into other areas of the communities of people that she claims are oppressing Black Americans.
Democrats say the words Black Lives Matter again and again. It became an incantation forced on people. Watch this strange clip from the Oscars this year.
And she's fearful of white people. White people are so bad. Well, why doesn't she want to live amongst Black people? Why is she choosing to move herself into an all-white neighborhood? These are important questions.
And Black Lives Matter. Say it with me, Jimmy. Black Lives Matter. Louder, Jimmy. Black Lives Matter. Louder, Jimmy. Say it so that Mike Pence can hear it. Black Lives Matter.
But looting in immediate response to that, why would we put up with that?
Hey, nothing says sincerity like screaming something at the Oscars on a stage full of rich people.
We shouldn't put up with that, but the reason why we do is because the Democrats see some advantage in this.
What's going on here? It's called a virtue signal. It's when people without virtue tell the rest of us that they are virtuous.
Right, so right now you have a bunch of criminals that love Black Lives Matter as an organization. They love when a Black person dies, and we don't know what the reasons are, we don't know what happened, but it signals to them that they are now allowed to run into the streets and grab whatever they want, whether it's from Target, whether it's from Walmart.
These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals.
And then do nothing. The queen of this is Nancy Pelosi.
So again, thank you, George Floyd, for sacrificing your life for justice. for being there to call out to your mom.
And what's remarkable also is that these corporations are standing behind Black Lives Matter, right? They're pouring money into these corporations. And I remember most notably during the George Floyd riots, Target even came out and said, we don't even care that we were rioted and looted because we just stand with Black Lives Matter.
Pelosi put on a kente cloth and kneeled in the U.S. Capitol on the Capitol floor. She could not stand up after kneeling, an apt metaphor.
That's not a normal thing for a corporation to do when it's losing money. So that means that a corporation must be getting something else, right? What is it? What are they investing in when they invest in the lie that is Black Lives Matter?
Our lives matter. Talk is cheap. If Democrats say Black Lives Matter, the only way to find out if they actually mean that is to look at their policies and the results of their policies.
What is the return? I think Josh Hawley alluded to it in the previous segment, and I think you're onto something when you say that the corporations seek to control this country. They're willing to give up money. They're willing to let their stores be rioted and looted because they see something bigger.
Let me suggest to you that if you are not taking seriously the following issues, you do not care about Black lives.
That they're gaining from these riots and these lootings and these lies, and that is control over this country. It's power, and it's sinister, and it's sick.
Okay, great. If you are against racism and the destruction of the Black community, how about removing the Planned Parenthood buildings altogether? That would be a great start. Ironically, and this is ironic because the name states Black Lives Matter, but the BLM movement itself may be the highest contributor to the highest spike in Black death in a generation. The chaos and hysteria created by the corporate embrace of the BLM movement this year made America less safe than it has ever been in our lifetime. Research proves it. Dozens of Americans were killed in BLM protests this year. Many of them were Black. You can see their faces right now on the screen. This is a tragedy, each and every single one. So why the correlation between BLM and death? It's a simple word: depolicing. It turns out when you demonize and assault and threaten the police, they tend to hold back out of fear, or quite literally quit the profession entirely. You're seeing that across the country. Many blue cities succeeded in defunding their police. The carnage from that decision has been horrific. Studies consistently show that more policing lead to less crime. Less police lead to more crime. So who are affected by this nightmarish spike in crime in the inner cities? Disproportionately Black Americans. Yet to this day, prominent national Democrats continue to demonize and call to abolish the police. Just last week, a member of the Squad, Rashida Tlaib, recently tweeted, "Policing in our country is inherently and intentionally racist. No more policing. No more incarceration. It cannot be reformed." Tlaib was congratulated by part-time mob leader, domestic terrorist, and fellow Democrat Maxine Waters for the sentiment, and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi backed them both up. Joe Biden himself has called for the partial defunding of police, which makes you wonder, do Democrats care about Black lives? You have to ask the question. Ultimately, you have to ask the question. Words and talk are meaningless. Not a single person we spoke with and asked that question wanted their police defunded. Most Americans we spoke with on those segments were indeed Black. The numbers do not lie. A poll from this week shows that fewer than 1 in 5 support the defund the police movement. In their rabid quest for power, Democrats have made Americans less safe. They have made America a less safe place for all of us, but especially for Black Americans. I have seen the results with my own 2 eyes. I live in a neighborhood not too far from where Davon was killed. I coach in the same football league that Davon played in. My home is close to where the football field he played on is. It's around the corner. I know his grandfather. Playing on the screen right now is footage from my cameras on my home. Outside of my home, you can see a mass homicide attempt on my block. A block surrounded by playgrounds and schools and football fields. A person who was shot in an attempted gangland assassination dove into my yard for cover. This is how children live in Democrat-controlled cities. D.C. is not the same place, and it's sad. I've been here for a decade, and when I moved here, it was not this city. The city has been destroyed by the leftists who do not care about Black lives or white lives or American lives. They only care about power. And the easiest way to strip them of power is to move with your feet, to vote with your feet. Move out of the tyranny states to the free states. Strip these bloodthirsty tyrants of their tax base and congressional seats. Take away their power to destroy and hold them accountable. Do it for Davon McNeil. Davon's life mattered. Your life matters. All life matters. Let's start acting like it. America, before it's too late.
Even the White House is blatantly lying about what happened here. This nonstop propaganda has a very negative effect. This is exactly why black Americans, and in fact Americans in general, think thousands of black people are killed by cops every year, when in reality the number's barely over 200. And that's with 40 million black Americans and millions of police interactions every year.
Almost 1,000 people have been murdered by police, have been killed by police.
And yet, what does the media do? The media focuses on cops, as if cops are somehow the problem.
Police have tremendous latitude to use deadly force, fine. But the problem is, at this point, everything police say to me is just a claim that needs to be proven.
Well, Laura, thank you for having me on, and thank you for showing a highlight tape of the dumbest people on planet Earth.
These white, domestic, state-sponsored terrorists, which is what Derek Chauvin and his 3 accomplices were that day. The state-sponsored terrorists.
All of these people should be ashamed of themselves coming out lying on this police officer and also lying on that girl.
He's talking about police officers who will give their life to keep all of you safe.
That girl had a knife in her hand and she was getting ready to stab another young black girl in the face.
What are we training police to do if they are not actually showing up on the scene and making the situation better for all involved? If you can't figure out how to de-escalate a 16-year-old, even with a kitchen knife, when you've got a gun and you're a grown man, you shouldn't be a cop.
She wasn't just swinging a knife, she was going to stab the girl in the face, and she was fatally shot.
You're telling me to fall in line with the social contract that you've created, but then once you break it and then you murder us, I'm not allowed to burn down a business?
Officers have every right to use deadly force against another person to protect the life of another individual.
It's an epidemic because the police, they don't care about the black people.
These people want there to be hatred and evilness in our country.
It is something that we cannot tolerate. It is something that we have to deal with as the civil rights issue of today. We need the federal government to step in and start acting like they promised. We stood up and voted as a community unprecedented numbers to put Democrats in the White House, in the Senate, and in the House. Now it's time to return our investment by protecting our lives against bad cops.
They want police officers to be demonized. They want police officers in the public to have conflict.
We just want our kids to have the same opportunity to survive their dumbest mistakes as every other kid has.
So they can continue to get better ratings.
Seems to me, in a situation, this is what it looked like to me, and I've looked at the tape and I still can't figure it out. Shoot the gun in the air as a warning, tase a person, shoot them in the leg, shoot them in the behind, stop them somehow. But if the only solution is to kill a teenager, there's something wrong with this.
They can continue to get reelected.
Their systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul.
To keep promising the public something they can never deliver on.
Democrats are still thirsting to divide us and turn everything without any evidence into systemic racism. Today we saw funeral services for Daunte Wright. It looked more like a state funeral. You see Al Sharpton there, Senator Amy Klobuchar as well. Now, of course, these people would never show up for the thousands of young black men murdered by criminals in Democrat-run cities. So no, there's no political gain in attending those funerals. Now, of course, Daunte Wright's death was tragic. He should not have died. Even the cop who shot him admits that. Many of you have seen this body camera footage where Wright resists arrest after officers learned that he had an active warrant for an illegal firearm. The officer, clearly warning him that he would be tased, fires her gun instead. But at the funeral today, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz presented Daunte Wright's parents with a flag and a proclamation where the governor insisted that Daunte Wright was a victim of systemic racism.
While nothing will bring Daunte Wright back to his loved ones, we must continue to enact real, meaningful change at the local, state, and national levels to fight systemic racism so that every single person in Minnesota, black, indigenous, brown, and white, can be safe and thrive.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And may Daunte Wright serve as a guardian for all of us. A young woman whose life was taken by Columbus police.
Taken by Columbus police, the life of Ma'Khia Bryant. Another sad story. no doubt there. Omar, though, doesn't mention the knife in Ma'Khia Bryant's hand that's about to be plunged into another girl, or anything about that other girl, the woman in pink, we all know now, whose life could have easily ended about 2 seconds after that officer decided to open fire. Yeah, cops are all racist. They hate black people. That's why they spend most of their time defending people in black neighborhoods and high crime areas.
These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has been betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals.
Every case, the police may not be wrong, but every case they're not right. And that is why there's such distrust, because they've unilaterally always gone with the police.
I have no idea what he was talking about. I have no idea what he just said.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals.
I think it's become clearer that fairness is overrated. Well, before you run off and tweet that headline, let me explain a bit. The idea that we should always give two sides equal weight and merit does not reflect the world we find ourselves in.
These are puppets.
Why is deadly force always the first order of business, and especially the first order of business when it comes to black and brown people in this country? We shouldn't live in a country, quite frankly, where it's acceptable for the police to shoot a 16-year-old 4 times in the chest over a fight. It goes from 0 to execution very, very quickly when there is a black or brown person involved. That is just the truth.
These are puppets.
If that would have been a 16-year-old white girl in a wealthy suburban neighborhood, would the police officer have sought to disarm this girl? Would the police officer sought to talk her down? Would the police officer would have used lethal force? And it's hard for me to believe that that would have happened.
These are puppets.
Ma'Khia Bryant, a 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio, called the police for help. An officer was on the scene, and in 22 seconds, he shot her dead. An honor roll student who's making TikTok videos on makeup and hair.
These are puppets.
Unless there is wholesale change, abolishment of this institution that continues to fail tax-paying black people in this country, everything else is just fanciful thinking.
These are puppets.
I remember fights in even high school or even younger than that where a kid brought a penknife or something to school and teachers were able to defuse that and they didn't have guns.
These are puppets.
According to Bree Newsom, quote, teenagers have been having fights, including fights involving knives, for eons, meaning a very long time. We do not need police to address these situations by showing up to the scene and using a weapon against one of the teenagers. Right. Just because someone's getting stabbed doesn't mean you have to stop it. Racist.
His family and our community is going through a lot. And the country has a lot of healing left to do.
On CBS This Morning.
Today is one stop on a journey that began last May and led to protests calling for that accountability in every town and every city in America.
I love being black. And that is what you call jubilation.
These are puppets.
I don't call it jubilation. I call it exploitation and monetization. This is the ultimate opportunity for more power, more money, and more fame. This episode, like so many others, being exploited by the media, by the far left. If I thought America was as bad as they say it is, I wouldn't live here. I just wouldn't. Why would you want to be the vice president of a systemically racist country? Look, they're just going which way the wind blows, and this is an opportunity. And Joe, by the way, he's just hanging on for dear life. And also, he just doesn't want to get yelled at again. You know where the moral authority right now is in the Democratic Party? It's not with 78-year-old white men. It's with primarily women of color. Remember when Joe got yelled at by the most famous woman of color in America?
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA from the very beginning when I ran for the
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds.
These are puppets.
She did that to him on national television in front of everybody. What happens behind closed doors? Virtue signaling, this kind of cheap rhetoric, it's a hell of a lot more fun, and it's a hell of a lot easier than tackling real issues, like crime going up incredibly, hugely all over the country. Look at these numbers. This is a real problem. Also, talking like Kamala does,
these are puppets,
and so many on the left, it's a lot more fun than confronting this, which is really surprising to a lot of people. Take a look at this. People shot to death by police in 2021, 213 total deaths, 30 of them, just 30 black individuals. That's interesting. Doesn't go with the narrative, does it?
Black men and black boys are killed by police with impunity in this country, and that is just the truth.
These are puppets.
Wow, with impunity. No concern or threat of punishment. With impunity. That's a hell of a statement.
I am the mother of an 18-year-old boy who is now in South Africa, and I feel that he is safer in South Africa than he is in his own country.
There's more, I'm sorry.
I am so relieved that this is what justice finally looks like for my community.
All right, a couple of things here. Let's talk about our community. We looked it up. We're not going to say which specific community it is, but it is a very wealthy enclave in the suburbs of New York City where the average income is over $900,000 a year. She mentioned her 18-year-old son who's spending time in South Africa. There he is. His name is Gabe. Seems to be having the time of his life. He's also enrolled at Harvard University, this systemically racist country that she seems to hate so much. Would he really be better
These are puppets.
off in South Africa? That's quite a statement, too. We looked it up. Here are some crime figures. Crime in South Africa, the 5th most dangerous country in the world, 58 murders per day. Is South Africa the place to be? I don't think so, but saying this kind of crazy stuff and being able to cry on camera, that enhances her status, not so much with the audience, but with the bosses.
This is exactly why black Americans, and in fact Americans in general, think thousands of black people are killed by cops every year, when in reality the number's barely over 200. And that's with 40 million black Americans and millions of police interactions every year.
Should we just gather up the white supremacists and do street justice?
That would be ideal. Again, I'm not going to say anything that would directly incriminate me, but I would say that would be a good idea.
I don't want to say we need to go start killing all white folks, but it's like, but maybe they need to feel the pain and the hurt.
Feel the same pain that we feeling. Feel the hurt that you were putting out. Get that back and see how it feels.
Amy, were you shocked by the responses you got when you went around asking people about race?
I was shocked, I was angered, but the emotion that washed over me the most was profound sadness. By the way, the one clip where the woman said, round up the white supremacists and do street justice. The clip before that was her defining white supremacy. It wasn't guys with white hats on. It was basically anybody who's a Republican who voted for Trump, who doesn't believe in race as the most important thing that we view the world through. So basically, most of this country, she said, was white supremacist.
Well, I just want to ask you about the media's role in this insanity. There was a piece published in Newsweek this week saying that 70% of white people and 95% of black people who think white Republican voters are racist believe that there's more black men killed by police than in car accidents. I mean, that is just so insanely wrong that it's frightening that such a large percentage of people would hold that belief. Is that the media's fault? Is it the school's fault? Is it the politicians? Where does that ignorance come from?
Yes, yes, yes.
LeBron!
LeBron!
A police officer involved shooting, this time in Ohio. A teenage black girl is dead.
Child in this community tragically died last night. This is a failure on part of our community.
Outrage erupting in the streets again over yet another police shooting, this time in Columbus, Ohio.
I am deeply concerned about what we are seeing all across our country.
We're going to be talking about yet another police-involved shooting.
Here we are looking at another, death of a human being on tape.
When they go like this, then you know they're really deeply, deeply affected. They're just trying to cash in. They want the crisis to continue. It's all about crisis. It's all about phony narratives. And this one is phony right there. Look at this from NBC Nightly News last night.
Police body cam video shows Ma'Khia Bryant's final moments when a Columbus, Ohio police officer responding to a call gets out of his car and seconds later fatally shoots the 16-year-old girl. Authorities say Bryant was threatening 2 other girls with a knife.
It's a tragedy.
Did you see how they didn't put the knife in her hands? They didn't show you? I made a point to circle it. I'll do it again. That's important. They just glossed over that, ignored that she was about to plunge that knife into the girl in the pink tracksuit. Why are the media leaving that out? And, maybe I can't blame LeBron that much. Maybe he just got really mad when he saw the fake news.
LeBron! LeBron!
LeBron James, with the responsibility he has, should have kept his mouth shut until more was known.
This is damn ridiculous.
LeBron is a force for division in this country.
These are puppets.
Where the hell is he?
There was plenty known at the time that LeBron James made that comment. What LeBron James did is he put a bounty on that officer.
I've been waiting for a long time for him to come tell me how to do my job. I even cleared my seat out for him for his ride-along.
He put a target, a bullseye on that officer. LeBron James and Benjamin Crump put out misinformation.
We have people to protect from getting stabbed in the face, and he's lollygagging somewhere.
Why? And Ben Crump said the woman was unarmed. She had a knife. Why, Bill?
Probably shooting free throws.
Because there is a war against law enforcement.
Huh. By the way, man, you really need to work on your stance. It's really not working out for you.
Here's the big lie, the systemic racism.
Oh, is that stupid? Oh, is it stupid for me to tell you how to do your profession? Yeah, well, it's just as stupid for you to tell us how to do ours.
And I wish Geraldo and everyone on the left who believes that cops are killing black people all the time.
Can we have LeBron call my cell phone right away, please? Thank you. Excuse me, sir.
Miranda Devine did a great article, New York Post, how many unarmed African Americans killed in April up until this year in 2021? 3.
Excuse me, no, can you put the knife down, please, sir? Sir, no, sir, don't stab it. No, stop stabbing. Stop, hold on, it's LeBron.
Oh, I was so institutionalized growing up in the hood, it's like they don't with us. They don't want us to succeed.
LeBron, hey, yeah, it's me again. Listen, I'm out here at this disturbance call, and there's a guy trying to stab another guy with a knife. What do you think I should do?
And in 2019, 12. If you listen to LeBron James when he said, I'm sick and tired of police killing black people, what about black on black crime?
Why does that matter? Okay, well, they're both black.
The hierarchy, and then we're here. Like, matter of fact, we're underneath this chair.
One guy's trying to stab another guy with a knife. Deadly force is completely justified.
I don't know. I'm so damn tired of seeing black people killed by police. I took the tweet down because it's being used to create more hate. This isn't about one officer. It's about the entire system, and they always use our words to create more racism. I am so desperate for more accountability.
I see. So you don't care if a black person kills another black person?
Accountability. That would be great, especially in, forgive me, LeBron and everyone else, your community. No, not this community. This is where he lives now. He does very well, LeBron. He lives in a very special world most of us can only dream of. There's his mansion in Beverly Hills.
But you do care if a white cop kills a black person, even if he's doing it to save the life of another black person?
I think we have a picture of him in one of his many cars. This one might be, yes, it's a Porsche.
I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but then again, you are really good at basketball, so I guess I'll take your word for it. All right. Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks, LeBron. Michael Jordan's the GOAT. What? Nothing, I gotta go. Sorry guys, you're on your own. Good luck.
And please, stop using me as a black man as your pawn. And yes, I said it. Push your agenda. I'm sick of it.
This video is brought to you by Extreme Tees. Click on the link below. Make sure you put Kevin in the promo code and you'll get a 20% discount.